Welcome to
Cigar
Public.
And welcome to Cigar Public. Hello, my name is Steve Saka from Dunbarton Tobacco Trust, and welcome to Cigar Public.
And I am sitting with the great Steve Saka. Saka Squatch.
Saka Khan.
Saka Khan.
Saka head. Saka whatever.
He's feeling pretty good. And very happy to be sitting here with you today, sir. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about early days, early Saka.
Oh, early Saka.
Let's talk about first blend that you had to your name, not with other companies, with Steve Saka.
So oddly enough, there's a lot of blends that I can't take credit for, but when I used to work for a company called JR Cigar, and my official title was executive consultant, which meant I got grossly overpaid. And I was involved in a lot of the projects that we used to do for JR Cigar. So it was not as intimately, a little rough around the edges, but that's kind of where I got started. And then probably the first like legit blending that became a real product that we sold was probably during my Drew Estate era. You know, I was intimately involved in a lot of things, but like with any large company like Drew Estate, no individual can take sole credit for anything, because there's a lot of really dedicated, hardworking people that contribute to the cause. I mean, we were making, you know, when I got there, we were making 400,000 cigars a month. When I left there, we were making like 2 million cigars a month. So, I mean, there's a lot of people that contribute to everything. I mean, Nicholas Over Foundation was part of it, Yesenia is part of it, Rubio was part of it, Marlon was part of it. There were a lot of fingers in the pie in a company like that.
So you finally launched Dunbarton Tobacco Trust after being with all of these very, very recognized
I'm actually one of the people in the industry that has the worst career path. Every job I've had, I've made less money at. Yeah, it's really a kind of a perplexing thing. You know?
So in retrospect, had you known then what you know now about the difficulties of having your own blend, your own label, your own company, would you still do it?
So I've been very blessed to be in a position where I've made many millions of dollars for other people. And luckily, I've had a taste along the way, because I've been partners and owned shares in most of the endeavors that I've done. You know, I look at Dunbarton Tobacco Trust. You know, you hear about that guy on Wall Street that does really well, and he moves to Vermont and he opens a goat cheese farm. This is my goat cheese farm. It's kind of what this is. It's a much different take on it. You know, today I just make blends that I like. I don't really worry about what things cost. I make them, I figure out what it costs to make it consistently, and then I make more of it, and I hope people buy it. If they don't buy it, then I'll stop making it. But I don't really, I mean, so much of what's happened in our industry is we make cigars for a demographic, a certain price point, a certain consumer. We kind of have almost a target audience before you actually make the cigar, where with us, the target audience is a target audience of one, which is me.
It's a great position to be in.
Yeah, no, look, and look, I'm only afforded that luxury because I've done well in other companies. I wouldn't be able to do that. And what I hope is, I hope that people identify with what I like to make. But like, we focus group nothing. Nobody in the factory look, everybody has an opinion, but nobody's opinion matters. Everything is me. I decide what I like, I decide what goes in the box, I decide how much it costs, I decide how it's going to be branded, 100% from top to bottom. And when things fail, then it's all on me. One of the things that's very, I have this kind of saying, when you make a cigar that everybody likes, you've ultimately made a cigar that nobody loves. So everybody's dollars are very hard earned, and you're asking them to open their wallets and buy something. So what you ultimately want is you want something that sings to them, something that's special, that's something that's unique. So if your palate happens to be similar to what I like as a palate, you're gonna be really pleased with my cigars. If you don't like what I make, in any of my brands, even from the mildest to the strongest, chances are you're probably not going to be a Dunbarton guy, because I'm the arbiter of everything from beginning to end. And that's just kind of the way I look at it. But it's a much different thing. We're a small family company. You know, we operate the business in a much different way. We're not. I mean, look, sales are necessary. Don't get me wrong. I'm in this business to make money. It's cigar business. I could make 5,000 to 6,000 cigars a year for me to smoke, and everything would be good. So I need it, but I want to do special things. I want to make a special crop for Sin Compromiso, Kappa crop. I want to reprise a tobacco seed that hasn't been grown in Honduras for 20 years. That's really expensive, and I'm not a billionaire, so I need consumers to support the brand in order to fund what I like to smoke. So I'm kind of like Huck Finn, trying to get other people to paint the fence so I can smoke cigars. I mean, that's kind of the way it is. And luckily for me, there's enough consumers whose palates, what they like, are common with what I like, and it's enough. It's not everybody, but it's enough.
So I'm interested to know, when you go about creating a blend and the story behind each blend with the names, the Sobremesa, the Mi Querida, does the concept and the story, the theme, does that come to your mind first and you try to find a blend that fits well into that story, or does the blend come first and you want to tell the story through that blend?
So there's really there's some basic ways that most cigars are developed today. The first way is that you have a particular tobacco you want to focus on, and that kind of becomes the jumping off point that you create a blend. The other way is that you have something that you feel like, oh, I don't have this in the portfolio, so let me create something that fills this gap in the portfolio. And the third way, which regretfully over the years has become the most popular way, is the sales and marketing weenies deciding, oh, well, we really think this idea would sell really well. Go make us something that fits this at this certain price point to fit this certain demographic. For me, a lot of it depends. So like Sobremesa, when I made the first Sobremesa blend, I was so well known for Liga Privada, I wanted to make something that was totally different. Something that was elegant, nuanced, and refined, which is so not me. You know, and because the easy thing would be to make what my second blend was, which is Mi Querida. Mi Querida is what I'm known for. Broadleaf, full-bodied, richer, heavier. I mean, Mi Querida for me, that's the cigar of necessity.
Right.
I mean, I've smoked so many cigars. I've smoked well over 100,000 cigars. It's the one consistent thing that has sung to my palate over the years. Connecticut broadleaf, medium full, heavy, rich, not too peppery, smooth enough. I like this kind of potato chip model, you know, like when you reach into a bag of potato chips, you can't eat just one. I like a cigar that as I smoke it, I find it satisfying, but at the same time, when I get to the end of it, I'm like, I need another one of those cigars. So Mi Querida is a brand of necessity. You know, and then other brands are like Sin Compromiso, where it sprung from, I wanted to do a unique wrapper crop. And so the whole brand was built around this unique wrapper crop where we were doing this innovative, unique kind of cultivation process. And then you have weird things like Stillwell, which are like totally in left field. You can like hate all my cigars and love Stillwell, or you can love all my cigars and absolutely hate Stillwell, because it's just so far off the reservation. But Stillwell is still very unique to me because I've always been a closet pipe smoker, and for many, many years I used to take my favorite pipe tobaccos and I would just add them to cigars. So it's a very Saka thing. So pretty much everything in the portfolio is really kind of a reflection of my own wants and desires and what I like to smoke. And that's kind of the way it goes. I mean, some things become out of necessity, like Popetta. We're making so many broadleaf blends and I'm buying so much tobacco that it's quite expensive. So I have these really expensive tobaccos that we're getting all these Privada cuts and table trimmings of, which normally get scooped into the table trimmings pile to make some shitty sandwich cigar that sells for $2. Well, why is my really good tobacco going into this shitty cigar with all the other shitty cigars?
I still paid for that.
Let's keep my good tobacco and let's make a better sandwich. Let's only use the good stuff. Let's pay more attention to the quality of the manufacturer. But that's a thing where it's an economic thing. Hey, if I sell this really high quality sandwich, it lets me offset my costs on Mi Querida to keep the Mi Querida prices better, so I don't have to jack up the Mi Querida prices. Because if I don't have a product like that, like Umbagog, I buy a lot of Connecticut broadleaf. I probably buy more Connecticut broadleaf than anybody right now. When you buy Connecticut broadleaf, you're buying by the entire crop.
Yeah.
You want it all to be pretty and pristine, but that's just not the way it is. If I'm lucky, I can use 70% of it on Mi Querida. If I'm unlucky, I use 40%. So what do you do with the other? I paid the same dollar for it, right? There was no price break on it. So having a product like Umbagog gives me a place to put the wrappers from the same crop, same quality, but they're not as aesthetically pleasing.
Right.
They're not as attractive. So hey, I have Umbagog to offset that cost. So some things are because they just make sense economically, and it works to the advantage of the consumer. But at the same time, when you buy an Umbagog, it's not as consistent as a Mi Querida. Mi Querida, you're paying more, but you're getting a much more consistent kind of style of blend. When you're paying $8 for an Umbagog, you're getting a hell of a cigar for $8, but sometimes it's a little stronger, sometimes it's a little milder, it's kind of a little bit of a fluff. So there's a lot of different positions depending on what you're doing. I mean, Sobremesa Brulee. I always wanted to make a mild, creamy Connecticut shade cigar. When I started smoking cigars, I smoked a lot of Connecticut shade cigars. Over the years, I transitioned into heavier body, stronger, darker wrapper cigars. I kind of moved away from lighter cigars. I don't know, I felt like most of the light Connecticut shade cigars of the market, they just seemed thin and wispy and a little almost acrid to me as I smoked them. They didn't remind me of the Macanudos and the Romeo Julietas that I smoked in the late 80s and early 90s. So I'm like, hey, can I do that? Can I make a cigar that reminds me of that cigar? And that's what started Sobremesa Brulee. And then you say, oh, you know, I had this really great cigar that I used to smoke from Cuba, Dom Perignon. And I'm like, hey, what can I do? And look, I can't make a cigar that tastes like a Cuban cigar, but what can I make that reminds me of that cigar? So that lets me make Sobremesa Brulee Blue. Brulee Blue is very similar to me, the way it evokes my emotion as I smoke it. It's very familiar to those old Dom Perignons. So everything is very, very personal. And what I hope is that I can sucker people into buying this shit so that ultimately I can keep making it. Because I love a Sobremesa Brulee Blue with my morning espresso. It's so good, but I'm not a billionaire.
Right.
I can't afford to make that cigar if people don't buy that cigar. So I'm kind of like the Huck Finn saying, hey, how can I get these guys to paint my fence? You know what I mean? So that I can continue to do what I want to do. So this whole thing is very, very selfish. The whole thing is incredibly selfish.
I appreciate the transparency, though.
It is what it is. And I hope that I'm delivering a product that is worthwhile to the consumer, that they find value in. Because, you know, I know a lot of consumers associate price with value, but that's not a true statement. Value is a very individual judgment. It depends on what you like. So for example, a Toyota Camry fully loaded does everything that a Mercedes does. It does, right? But there's something about when you sit in that Mercedes and the fit and the finish and the comfort and the little execution of details that makes the Mercedes guy go, you know what? I'm okay with spending $50,000 more for this car. I feel the difference. And that's very much what we do. We make these cigars that are just a bit of cut above, a bit bit more attention to detail, more execution, and look, we charge for it. And ultimately, the consumer gets to decide, is that worth the money or is that not worth the money? But I don't really worry about what cigars cost. You know, the other thing that's really unique about us is we take every cigar and we make the exact same margin on it. So our cheapest brand, whether it be Omagog or now the new Popeta, I make the same profit on a Popeta at $7 as I make on a Paladin de Saka that's $30.
Very interesting.
And the reason why I do this is because, so if a cigar costs more to the consumer, it's because it costs me that much more to make. And the reason why I do this is because all the companies that I've worked for in the past, we would always have brand X, and brand X would be selling like crazy. And we make more money on brand Y. So then you tell all your sales and marketing meetings, focus on brand Y. We make more brand on brand Y. But in the end, the consumer gets to decide what the winner is. So for me, I love all my children, but they all have to live or die on their own. So if Omagog is my #1 seller and it's $8, $9 a cigar, so be it. And if Sin Compromisos that are $15 to $20 or $29 in the case of Paladin de Saka aren't, then so be it. That's just the way it ultimately is. And that's a really unique approach. So
I've never heard anybody doing it that way.
I have my favorites, but in the end, they all have to go do what they do. And it makes it where I don't have any investment, that I don't have any commercial reason to sell more than another one.
Right.
They're all equal to me. And that's true all the way from the $100 unicorn. Well, unicorns don't count. They don't actually make a lot of money on unicorns, but unicorns are more marketing than anything else. But everything in the portfolio, it's all equal. And ultimately, the consumer gets to decide what's a good value to them, you know, and that's kind of the way I've approached it. And we've been very blessed.
It seems to have served you well.
Yeah, I mean, it's simple, it's crude. I mean, a lot of people would say that I'm an idiot, but I don't actually care, you know.
Shifting gears a little bit, talk about Cigar Media. Do you consume any cigar media? Do you
consume all of it.
And is there...
Look, ultimately, I started off as a cigar geek.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm still a cigar geek. I mean, I've always been a cigar geek. That's how I got started. I mean, the way I got started was like, I started smoking when I was enlisted in the Navy. I had no money. When I got out of the Navy, I started an engineering company. I started to make some bank. Once I started doing that, I started buying better quality cigars, and then I started traveling to Honduras and the Dominican Republic and Nicaragua on my own dime. Because I was like, literally, I'd knock on the door and say, hey, I'm a fat guy that likes your cigars. Can I come in and take a look? And at that time, it was before Cigar Aficionado. And they were like, what? There's some guy that's like in fucking Cofradía, Honduras, and he wants to come see what we do? It was, and that's how I got my start in the whole thing. I still, at my core, I still remain a cigar geek. And I think it's, look, I know so much of our business is built on the whole lifestyle and demographic and this luxury perspective. Look, I make cigars that definitely today that are in that price point, but that's not who I began as. I mean, I smoked tons of backwoods. I smoked tons of money makers. That's what I could afford to smoke. I was always looking for, this is my budget, what's the best cigar I can find within my budget? And that's what I always seeked out. And look, now fast forward 40 years in the future, I'm at a point now that pretty much most cigars I like to smoke, they cost about $14 to $20. That's where the market has taken us. And if you look at most of my portfolio, most of it is there. And I understand that that's too expensive for some consumers. But at the same time, it's not my job to make something for every price point. There's plenty of great cigar companies. AJ Fernandez makes a great product if you want to spend $8. Nick Perdomo makes a hell of a cigar if you have that kind of money. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people, but that's not what I personally smoke today. Most of what I smoke today is $12 to $20. That's where I am at. And so those are the cigars we as a company make. I don't have to satisfy everybody. I just have to satisfy a certain niche. And for me, that's what I focus on. I don't worry about everything else.
So with Cigar Media, is there something you would like to see more of and a heavier emphasis of, an improvement?
No, I'll tell you what I like. I like the diversification of Cigar Media. As far as I'm concerned, the more voices there are, the more chatter there is better ultimately for the industry. What I don't like is back like in the mid-90s when Cigar Aficionado was the only voice. Right. Because when you have one voice that's the only voice, it starts to dictate what actually is the market.
Correct.
And that just isn't true. So I like the democratization of media. I love the fact that the internet has become what it's become. Look, I was one of the original guys. I was like probably the first cigar blogger in the mid-90s before the term ever got invented.
Sure.
I had a website called Cigar Nexus. It was like the #1 visited cigar. We had our own reviews, and we did all the same stuff that you're currently doing now. You know what I mean? But back in the day when there were so few of us,
no one was doing it.
Right, nobody was doing it. So for me, the more voices, the more opinions, because look, it's diverse. There's a wide range of consumers. There's a wide range of needs. There's a wide range of tastes. So for me, the more people that are talking about cigars, discussing cigars, debating cigars, saying Saka cigars are shit or they're overpriced, that's great. Because I think it exposes consumers to far more information. And as we moved on, today's consumer is so much different.
Yeah.
You know, look, my dad, when we would go to buy a new car, he would visit, you know, Ford and Chevy, and he'd go over to the GMC guys and blah, blah, blah. And he would test drive like 6, 7 cars on the lot. That's not how we buy cars today. We research it all on the internet. We almost we know what car we want and we know what options we want before we ever go to the dealership. You know what I mean? It's so different now. So the more information that's out there that lets that consumer that wants to research, the better it is for the industry overall. And it takes the power away from all the really super big, you know, conglomerate companies that have the huge marketing budgets and the huge sales teams. It allows somebody like me, you know, to actually compete head to head. And so I'm all in favor. I want more Cigar Media, not less.
Looking at the cigar culture as it exists right now, is there anything you would change, you would like to see more of?
You always wish there's more education, right?
Exactly.
I mean, and look, there's a lot of stuff that's put out into the universe that's wrong. But that's the way the internet works, right? I mean, we all, fake news, fake news, fake news. There's plenty of fake news in the cigar business too. But in the end, the consumer eventually gets into cigars and they figure it out. They figure out what they like, who's legit, who isn't legit, what's all hype, what isn't hype. It takes them a little time, but they eventually get there in the long run. I look at a lot of cigar groups and I have to really stop myself because there's so many things that people write that are just outright wrong, and I want to like chime in, but it's literally like a 24/7 job to add your commentary to everything. And the other thing too is, how do you do that without coming off as a total asshole too, right? Because you don't want to be that guy on the mountain that's like screaming down at people. So you just have to absorb it. What I do know is that I know from my own journey, it takes time to figure out what's actually good and bad. It takes time to figure out your own palate. I mean, I know for me personally, I fell in love with something new every Tuesday, right? It took me 10, 12 years before I started to figure out what really works for me. You know, what's really best for me. And there's no way to really truncate that experience. I sometimes wish there was less noise, but the more noise there is, is also what attracts people and brings them in. So ultimately, it's a good thing. It's always going to be a little messy, you know, but I think in the end, it's one of those things that eventually consumers settle on. And it's one of the things that I'm really like, if you look at the people that like smoke a lot of our cigars, there's a lot of people that have been smoking cigars for 20 and 30 years that are really hardcore Dunbarton customers. I say this, that our best customers are those that are the most experienced and the most discerning. You don't actually know what's really great and not great until you have spent so many years kissing so many different girls. And then you finally realize, oh, this is the one that's actually a good lay. You know what I mean? And it's one of the things that I really pride ourselves on. If you look at our customers, a lot of them are a lot of really hardcore smokers that have literally smoked, you know, not 10 or 20 or 40 brands. They've smoked hundreds of brands over 10 and 20 years. And that's very, very rewarding for me. And, you know, and I look at like some of the cigar groups and I see a guy raving about this thing or that thing, and I'm like, dude, you just don't know yet. Yeah. Because there's something that is in that profile that you like the taste of that's so much better, that actually costs $3 less, but you haven't gotten there yet.
Right.
You know what I mean? But
yeah.
I can't tell that to you.
Right, they wouldn't be able to hear it anyway.
You have to come to that conclusion on your own. And when you're ready to come to that conclusion, you'll make that conclusion. So in the end, it takes time, but the wheat does separate from the chaff eventually. It does.
Very biblical.
Yeah. Well, I don't know about that.
Steve, I want to thank you for your time. Great interview.
Nah, my pleasure.
Pleasure to meet you, sir.
Oh, pleasure to meet you.
Have a great show.
I really have to take a piss.